When we picture the end of the world, we often imagine fire. We imagine chaos, noise, and destruction. But there is a place on this planet that looks like the end of the world has already happened, and it is defined not by fire, but by a terrible, beautiful, and absolute silence. This is Antarctica. To the human eye, it is a void. It is a blank canvas of white that stretches from horizon to horizon, a continent of ice larger than Europe and Australia combined, sitting alone at the bottom of the earth. It looks static. It looks dead. It looks like a place where time has simply stopped. But this stillness is a deception. The ice is not a lid, it is a curtain. And beneath that frozen veil, there is a world as complex, as violent, and as mysterious as anything on the surface. Tonight we are going to peel back the white layer. We are going to descend into the frozen tomb to find out what lies beneath. To understand what is hidden, we must first confront the barrier itself. Antarctica is the highest, driest, coldest, and windiest continent on Earth. It is a desert of water. The ice here is not a thin crust, it is a geological weight. On average, the ice sheet is over a mile thick. In its deepest basins, it plunges down to nearly 3 miles. That is a depth greater than the height of most mountains on other continents. This immense mass of ice, accumulated over 34 million years of snowfall, is heavy. It is so heavy that it has physically crushed the continent beneath it. The sheer weight of the ice sheet has pushed the bedrock of Antarctica down into the Earth's mantle by hundreds of meters. If the ice were to vanish instantly today, the land would spring back up, but it would take 10,000 years to recover. This phenomenon is called isostatic depression. The continent is literally bowing in submission to the water that covers it.
But the ice is not just heavy, it is old. The air trapped in the deepest layers is a fossil atmosphere. The dust frozen in its strata is the dust of ancient volcanic eruptions and asteroid impacts. Walking on the surface of the Antarctic plateau is walking on a frozen library of Earth's history. It feels solid, immovable, and eternal. But as we are about to see, the ice is not a solid block. It is a fluid. It moves. It flows. And sometimes, giants wake up. The illusion of Antarctica is stillness. We imagine the ice as a permanent fixture locked in place for eternity. But the ice is alive. To understand the scale of this movement, we must look at a single colossal object known as A23A. It is the world's largest iceberg, a titan of frozen water weighing nearly 1 trillion tons. Its surface area is vast, covering 1,500 square miles, making it larger than the state of Rhode Island. For decades, this giant was asleep. It broke away from the ice shelf in 1986, a time when the Cold War was still freezing global politics, but it did not float away. Its keel, the massive underwater mountain of ice beneath the surface, slammed into the seafloor. It grounded. For over 30 years, it remained stuck, a stationary island of ice while the world changed around it. But in 2020, something shifted. Perhaps the water warmed slightly, or the rock beneath it gave way. A23A lifted. It began to move. Now, this trillion-ton ghost is drifting north, carried by currents towards its eventual doom in warmer waters. It is a reminder that in Antarctica, the landscape itself is transient. The ground you walk on today may be the ocean you sail through tomorrow. The sheer physical presence of this ice creates a reality that is difficult to grasp. We are talking about a layer of frozen water that seals the continent off from the atmosphere, from the sun, and from the passage of time. Under this crushing weight, the laws of physics begin to change. The pressure at the base of the ice sheet is so intense that it lowers the melting point of water. This creates a paradox.
The surface of Antarctica is one of the coldest places in the universe, but the bottom of the ice, where it meets the bedrock, is wet. The pressure melts the ice from below, creating a hidden, lubricated layer. The entire ice sheet is not sitting on rock. It is floating on a microscopic film of water. This slippery interface allows the ice to flow, to slide off the continent and into the sea.
It is a dynamic, shifting lid hiding the true geography of the land beneath. If you could strip away the ice, if you could melt the lid of the world, the landscape revealed underneath would not be a flat, scoured plain. It would be a rugged, dramatic, and towering wilderness. In the middle of East Antarctica, buried completely beneath the thickest part of the ice sheet, lies a mountain range that defies belief. These are the Gamburtsev Mountains. They are ghosts. No human eye has ever seen their peaks. No wind has touched their summits for 30 million years. They were discovered not by explorers on foot, but by Russian scientists in the 1950s using seismic sounding equipment, listening to the echoes bouncing off the rock deep below. What they found was staggering. This is not a small hill. It is a range the size of the European Alps. The peaks rise up to 10,000 feet, tearing into the underbelly of the ice. There are jagged cliffs, deep U-shaped valleys carved by ancient rivers, and sharp summits that look as though they were sculpted yesterday. The mystery is how they are still there. Usually, glaciers act like sandpaper, grinding mountains down to flat stumps over millions of years. But here, the ice seems to have acted as a preservative. It froze the mountains in time, protecting them from erosion like a fly trapped in amber. They are a fossilized landscape, a pristine mountain range standing in absolute darkness, supporting the weight of a continent on their shoulders.
But there are things beneath the ice that are far more ominous than mountains. In the region known as Wilkes Land, hidden beneath kilometers of frozen water, satellites have detected something strange. They didn't see it with light, they felt it with gravity. There is a mass con, a massive concentration of mass buried deep in the crust. It pulls at the satellites as they pass overhead. This gravitational scar is huge, hinting at a circular structure nearly 300 miles wide. This is the Wilkes Land anomaly. The leading theory is that it is an impact crater, but not just any crater. If the interpretation is correct, it is the scar of a meteor impact 2 or 3 times larger than the one that killed the dinosaurs. It sits there, a silent circular wound in the bedrock, completely filled and hidden by the ice. To understand the scale of this violence, we have to realize that the object that made this hole would have been an asteroid perhaps 30 miles across. Its impact would have rung the Earth like a bell and sent a shockwave through the planet strong enough to shatter the crust on the opposite side of the world. The dating of this potential crater leads us to a chilling possibility. The rocks in this region suggest an age of roughly 250 million years. This number rings a bell in the mind of every geologist. It aligns perfectly with the date of the Great Dying, the Permian-Triassic extinction event. This was the moment when 96% of all life on Earth vanished. For years, we blamed the Siberian Traps volcanoes, but the Wilkes Land crater suggests a darker, more complex conspiracy. Could this be the trigger? Could this impact have punched through the Earth's crust, shaking the mantle so violently that it caused the volcanoes on the other side of the globe to erupt? It is possible that Antarctica holds the smoking gun for the greatest murder mystery in planetary history. The evidence is there, locked under the coldest blanket on Earth, waiting for us to drill down and touch the stone that killed the old world. The discovery of the hidden water did not happen all at once. It began as a ghost signal in the data during the height of the Cold War. In 1964, Soviet researchers dragging seismic equipment across the endless white wastes noticed something odd in their readings. The sound waves they fired down into the ice usually bounced back unevenly, reflecting the jagged, rough terrain of the buried bedrock. But in one specific vast area near the pole of cold, the signal changed. It came back flat, perfectly, impossibly flat. For years, this was an anomaly, a data glitch. It wasn't until 1973, when British, American, and Danish teams flew airborne radar surveys over the region, that the picture cleared. The radar penetrated the ice and revealed a boundary that looked exactly like the surface of a mirror. It was the reflection of water. There was a liquid horizon buried beneath 2.5 miles of solid ice. The world was not looking at a frozen pocket. It was looking at a subterranean sea. This is Lake Vostok. It is the crown jewel of the Antarctic underworld. To grasp its scale, imagine Lake Ontario in North America, but place a roof of ice over it that is thousands of feet thick. It is huge, 149 miles long and 31 miles wide. It is a body of water that has been hermetically sealed off from the rest of the planet for at least 15 million years. It is the loneliest water on Earth. The lake exists in perpetual crushing darkness. The pressure at the surface of the water is over 350 atmospheres, enough to crush a nuclear submarine like a soda can. Yet the water does not freeze. It is kept liquid by the immense pressure of the ice above and the gentle warmth of the Earth's geothermal heat radiating from below. It is a thermal blanket situation. The ice acts as a perfect insulator, trapping the planet's internal fire against the water, keeping it just above the freezing point in a delicate, eternal balance. The isolation of Lake Vostok has created a chemical environment unlike anything else on Earth. As the glacier slowly moves over the lake, the bottom layers of the ice melt, adding water to the system. But this ice contains air bubbles, ancient atmosphere trapped millions of years ago. When the ice melts, that air is released into the lake. But because the lake is sealed under high pressure, the gas cannot escape. It dissolves. Over millions of years, this process has pumped the lake full of gas. Scientists estimate that the water of Lake Vostok is supersaturated with oxygen, perhaps 50 times more oxygenated than a normal freshwater lake. In most contexts, oxygen is good for life, but at these extreme concentrations, oxygen becomes a toxic chemical agent. The water of Vostok is not just dark and cold, it is a hyper-oxygenated chemical pressure cooker. Any life that exists there would have to be adapted to conditions that would poison an ordinary fish or crab. And yet, life is tenacious. When scientists drilled down toward the lake, stopping just short of breaching it to avoid contamination, they retrieved samples of the accretion ice, the lake water that had frozen onto the bottom of the glacier. In this ice, they found DNA. They found the signatures of bacteria, extremophiles that thrive in the cold and dark. Some were thermophiles, suggesting they live clustered around hot hydrothermal vents on the lake floor, feeding on minerals rather than sunlight. But there were stranger findings. Some DNA sequences hinted at more complex life, multicellular organisms, fungi, and even crustaceans. There was even a genetic signature that looked suspiciously like a parasite usually found in fish. This sparked a wild, controversial theory. Could there be fish down there? Could there be blind white shoals swimming in the eternal dark of Vostok, protected from the ice ages that ravaged the surface? We do not know. The lake remains breached only in our imagination, a sealed biosphere waiting for a camera to one day reveal its ghosts. The obsession with Lake Vostok is not just about understanding Earth. It is a rehearsal. It is a test run for the search for alien life. When we look out into the solar system, we see moons like Europa orbiting Jupiter and Enceladus orbiting Saturn. These are ice worlds. They have thick, frozen shells covering vast liquid saltwater oceans, maintained by tidal heating. They look exactly like Lake Vostok, just on a planetary scale. If life can exist in the cold, dark, high-pressure, oxygen-rich waters of Vostok, cut off from the sun for millions of years, then it can exist on Europa. Vostok is our proxy. It is the closest thing we have to an alien ocean on our own planet. Every discovery made in the darkness of Antarctica brings us one step closer to answering the question of whether we are alone in the universe. The ice of the South is a telescope looking into the possibilities of the cosmos. Antarctica is a land of contradictions, a place where the laws of nature seem to wage war against one another. But nowhere is this conflict more visually violent than at the site of Mount Erebus. Standing on Ross Island, rising nearly 12,000 feet out of the frozen sea, this mountain is a sentinel of fire in a kingdom of ice. It is the southmost active volcano on Earth, but to call it a volcano feels insufficient. It is a portal. Erebus has been erupting continuously for at least 1.3 million years. It is not a dormant mountain. It is a breathing, living, geological entity. At its summit, it holds a rare feature found in only a handful of planets, a permanent churning lava lake. The sight is surreal.
Against the blinding white backdrop of the glaciers and the deep, bruising blue of the polar sky, a plume of steam and sulfurous gas rises constantly from the crater. In the months of total winter darkness, the summit glows with a menacing red light, illuminating the underside of the steam clouds like a lighthouse warning of the end of the world.
It is a boiling cauldron of phonolite lava, a rare type of molten rock rich in feldspar, bubbling at nearly 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, surrounded by ice that is frozen solid at 50 degrees below zero. It is a thermal battleground where the planet's internal heat meets its external cold. But the true wonder of Erebus is not at the summit, it is on the flanks. The heat escaping from the volcano does not just vent into the air, it seeps through the rocks and encounters the ice. This interaction creates ghost-like structures called fumaroles, towers of ice up to 30 feet high that vent steam into the polar air. But below these towers, the heat has carved out a secret world. It has melted complex networks of caves directly into the glacier. These are the ice caves of Erebus. To enter them is to step into a fantasy landscape. The walls are made of blue ice, translucent and glowing with the filtered light from the surface. The floor is often warm rock or soft volcanic sand. The air is thick with steam. It is a humid, misty environment protected from the violent katabatic winds raging just a few feet of ice above. The temperature difference inside these caves is staggering. Outside, on the slopes of the mountain, the wind chill can freeze exposed skin in minutes. But inside the caves, deep in the thermal pockets, the temperature can reach a balmy 77 degrees Fahrenheit. It is t-shirt weather buried in the coldest place on Earth. If you were to stand there in the warm dark, listening to the drip of melting ice and the hiss of escaping steam, you would lose all sense of where you are. You are not in a freezer, you are in a sauna. This thermal stability creates a potential habitat that has existed for hundreds of thousands of years, completely isolated from the rest of the continent.
Life, as we have seen, hates a vacuum. Where there is heat and water, biology follows. Scientists exploring these steam caves have found traces of DNA that do not match the simple organisms found on the surface ice. They have found mosses, algae, and small invertebrates flourishing in the warm, damp dark. But the DNA analysis hints at something more tantalizing: genetic sequences that do not fully match any known species in the databases. This suggests that the caves of Erebus might host a unique subterranean ecosystem, plants and animals that have evolved in isolation, adapting to a world of volcanic steam and blue ice light. It opens the possibility that there are complex life forms in Antarctica that have never seen the sky, creatures of the hollow mountain. Erebus is the visible giant, but it is likely just the chimney of a much larger factory. In 2017, researchers analyzing radar maps of West Antarctica made a startling discovery. Buried over a mile beneath the ice, hidden from view, they found the conical shapes of 91 previously unknown volcanoes. This makes the West Antarctic Rift System one of the largest volcanic provinces on Earth, rivaling the Great Rift Valley of East Africa. Most of these volcanoes are currently asleep, dormant giants crushed under the weight of the ice sheet. But they are not dead. If they were to wake up, the consequences would be global. An eruption beneath the ice would not necessarily blast into the sky. Instead, it would melt the base of the glacier. It would create vast lakes of lubricant between the rock and the ice, unsticking the ice sheet and allowing it to slide faster into the ocean. The fire below acts as a potential accelerator for sea level rise, a geological wildcard that could destabilize the entire West Antarctic ice sheet from the bottom up.
The ice of Antarctica is more than frozen water. It is frozen time. As snow falls on the high plateau, it does not melt. It accumulates layer upon layer, year after year, century after century. As the weight of the new snow presses down on the old, it traps tiny pockets of air between the crystals. When the snow compacts into ice, these bubbles are sealed off forever. They become microscopic time capsules, samples of the Earth's atmosphere from the exact moment they were buried. By drilling deep into the ice sheet, sometimes nearly 2 miles down, scientists can retrieve cylinders of ice that act as a vertical timeline. When these cores are brought to the surface and melted in a vacuum, the ancient air pops and hisses as it is released. It is the sound of the past exhaling. We can breathe the air of the Roman Empire. We can analyze the dust from volcanic eruptions that darkened the sky before humanity existed. We can measure the carbon dioxide levels from the last ice age. The ice cores have given us a continuous climate record stretching back 800,000 years, a high-resolution logbook of every fever and every chill the planet has endured. It is a library where the pages are made of ice, written in the language of isotopes and dust. At the snout of the Taylor Glacier in the McMurdo Dry Valleys, there is a sight that looks like a wound in the world. Against the stark, blinding white of the ice and the gray of the rock, a deep, visceral, crimson liquid pours out of the glacier. It stains the ice red, flowing down into the frozen Lake Bonny below. This is blood falls. For decades, explorers thought it was red algae, but the truth is far stranger. It is rust. The water pouring from the glacier comes from a subglacial lake that has been trapped beneath the ice for over 1 million years. This ancient lake is extremely salty, a brine 3 times saltier than the ocean, which prevents it from freezing even at 14 degrees Fahrenheit. It is also rich in iron scraped from the bedrock by the grinding of the glacier. When this iron-rich, oxygen-starved water finally reaches the surface and touches the air for the first time in an eon, it reacts instantly.
It oxidizes, it rusts. The glacier is literally bleeding iron oxide. But the brine carries something else: bacteria, microbes that have lived in total darkness, breathing iron and sulfur instead of oxygen, surviving in a cold, salty tomb. Bloodfalls is a portal to a lost ecosystem, a dramatic, colorful signal flare from the life hiding in the dark. Antarctica is also the world's greatest collector of alien artifacts. The continent acts as a giant catcher's mitt for falling stars. Meteorites fall all over the Earth at a constant rate, but in a forest or an ocean, they are lost. In Antarctica, they fall on a white sheet. A black rock sitting on white ice is impossible to miss. But the ice does more than just provide contrast. It gathers them. As the ice sheets flow from the high interior toward the coast, they carry the fallen meteorites with them. When the ice hits a mountain range, it slows down and is ablated, worn away by the fierce dry winds. As the ice evaporates, the old meteorites embedded within it are left behind, accumulating on the surface in stranding fields. Scientists can walk across these blue ice fields and pick up rocks that have traveled from the asteroid belt, from the Moon, and even from Mars. Some of the most significant Martian meteorites ever found, rocks that hinted at the possibility of ancient life on the red planet, were picked up off the Antarctic ice. It is a cosmic paradox. The best place to study the geology of the solar system is looking down at the ice of the South Pole. It is hard to imagine, standing on the barren plateau today, that this land was once loud with life. But if you were to travel back 100 million years to the Cretaceous period, the silence would be replaced by the roar of a waterfall and the call of beasts. Antarctica was not an ice cube. It was a cornerstone of the supercontinent Gondwana. It was connected to Australia and South America, part of a vast green southern empire. The continent sat further north than it does today, but it was still within the polar circle. Yet because the global climate was much warmer, a hothouse Earth with no ice caps, Antarctica was lush.
It was covered in temperate rainforests, similar to the ones found in New Zealand or Patagonia today. Rivers wound through valleys that are now buried under miles of ice. The air was thick with pollen and the hum of insects. It was a polar paradise, a green world at the bottom of the map. The evidence of this lost world is preserved in the rock. On the Antarctic Peninsula and the Transantarctic Mountains, paleontologists have found fossils that cheffer our perception of the poles. They have found the leaves of the southern beech tree, Nothofagus, and the fronds of giant ferns. But the most baffling discovery is the root systems. We find fossilized roots preserved in situ, exactly where they grew. This tells us something profound. These trees were not washed here by a flood. They lived here. But living at the pole presents a unique challenge. Even in a warm world, the tilt of the Earth dictates that the poles experience months of total darkness in winter and months of total daylight in summer.
These were the polar forests. The trees had to adapt to a light cycle found nowhere else. They likely went dormant in the winter, shedding their leaves to survive the long, dark night, and then exploded into frantic growth during the 24-hour sunlight of the summer. It was a forest of shadows, a biome adapted to a rhythm of light and dark that would be alien to any modern tree. The green history of Antarctica had one final feverish chapter. About 50 million years ago, during the Eocene epoch, the Earth experienced a sudden intense spike in global temperature known as the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere soared. The world became a jungle. During this time, the coast of Antarctica was not just temperate, it was subtropical. Drill cores taken from the seabed off the coast of Wilkes Land have revealed the pollen of palm trees and the spores of macadamia plants. Imagine a landscape that looks like the coast of Florida, but situated at the South Pole. The water was warm, perhaps 68 degrees Fahrenheit, suitable for swimming. Crocodiles and turtle-like reptiles likely basked on the shores.
It was the planet's last great heat wave, a final luxuriant bloom before the long cooling began. It serves as a potent reminder of how sensitive the polar regions are to the chemistry of the atmosphere. The difference between an ice sheet and a palm tree is just a few hundred parts per million of carbon dioxide. If we view Antarctica as a continental fortress, a white citadel protected by currents and cold, then we must also acknowledge that every fortress has a gate. Every defense has a point of failure. For the southern continent, that point lies on the remote coast of West Antarctica, flowing into the dark, turbulent waters of the Amundsen Sea. It is a single colossal river of ice known to glaciologists as the Thwaites Glacier. But in the whispers of the scientific community and the headlines of the world, it carries a darker, heavier name. It is called the Doomsday Glacier. This title is not born of melodrama or panic. It is a cold, hard reflection of physics. To understand the singular importance of this object, we must first grasp its scale. Thwaites is not a glacier in the way we usually imagine them. It is not a picturesque river of ice winding through a mountain valley. It is a monster. It is a frozen expanse roughly the size of Great Britain or the state of Florida. It is over 70 miles wide at its face, a chaotic, churning wall of white that towers high above the ocean's surface and extends thousands of feet below it. But its size is not the reason for the fear. The fear comes from its function. Thwaites acts as a keystone. In ancient architecture, the keystone is the central wedge-shaped block at the top of an arch. It is the piece that locks all the other stones in place. It bears the weight of the structure. If you remove the keystone, the arch does not just sag, it collapses. Thwaites plays this exact role for the West Antarctica ice sheet. It is the cork in the bottle. Behind it, pushing against it with the weight of billions of tons, lies a vast, deep basin of continental ice that is currently resting below sea level. For thousands of years, Thwaites has been the brake. Its heavy, thick tongue has pinned this continental mass in place, grinding against the seafloor and holding back the flow. But now, the brake is failing. Satellites looking down with radar eyes have revealed a landscape of trauma. The surface of Thwaites is no longer a solid sheet, it is shattering. Massive cracks, some extending for miles, are spreading across the ice shelf like a spiderweb on a broken windshield. The glacier is accelerating, flowing faster into the sea, stretching and thinning under its own tension. We are looking at the single most vulnerable point on the entire planet, the loose thread that, if pulled, has the potential to unravel the coastline of every continent on Earth. The destruction of Thwaites is happening in the dark, hundreds of meters beneath the surface of the ocean, in a place where no human eye can see. It is an ambush from below. Most glaciers sit on land that slopes upward as you move inland, like a ramp. If the ice retreats, it moves into higher, shallower ground, which naturally slows it down. But Thwaites sits on a retrograde slope. The bedrock beneath it is shaped like a vast, deep bowl. As you go further inland, the ground doesn't go up, it goes down. It gets deeper and deeper, plunging kilometers below sea level into the heart of the continent. A specific layer of ocean water has begun to invade this trap. It is called circumpolar deep water. It is salty, dense, and crucially, it is warm. It creeps onto the continental shelf, heavy and relentless, and flows underneath the floating shelf of the glacier. It invades the cavity, the dark space between the ice and the rock. This water acts like a blowtorch. It attacks the grounding line, the critical anchor point where the ice physically grips the seafloor. We know this because we have sent our machines where we cannot go. In recent years, autonomous yellow submarines have been lowered through boreholes of the ice, descending into the pitch-black cavity. These robots have mapped the seafloor and returned with a haunting image. Etched into the sediment are ribs, hundreds of parallel ridges in the sand. These are footprints. They mark the past positions of the grounding line, created by the tides lifting and dropping the heavy ice as it retreated. These spectral ribs tell a story of rapid pulses, proving that the glacier is capable of sudden, violent bursts of retreat. But the threat to Antarctica does not just come from the warming air or the rising sea. It comes from a different kind of pressure. It comes from human hunger. Beneath the crushing weight of the ice, and buried deeper still within the sedimentary basins of the continental shelf, lies a secret that turns this pristine wilderness into a target. Antarctica is not just a scientific preserve, it is a vault. And inside that vault is the ghost of the ancient green world we spoke of earlier. The lush rainforests of Gondwana, the fern swamps of the Eocene, the massive algal blooms of the Cretaceous oceans, all of that organic life lived, died, sank, and was buried. Over tens of millions of years, the heat and pressure of the Earth cooked that dead life into black gold. Seismic surveys have probed the continental shelves of the Ross Sea and the Weddell Sea. What they found was the unmistakable signature of massive sedimentary basins, the geological architecture of oil. The estimates are theoretical, but they are staggering. Reports suggest there could be hundreds of billions of barrels of oil and unimaginable cubic feet of natural gas locked beneath the Southern Ocean. It is the last great untapped energy prize on Earth. And there is a profound, tragic irony waiting in the rock. The very substance that is melting the ice sheet, fossil fuel, is hiding in vast quantities underneath it. The ice is acting as a lid on a reservoir of temptation. We are burning the ancient dead to warm the planet, and in doing so, we are unlocking the door to burn even more.
Currently, this black treasure is locked away not by technology, nor by the ice itself, but by a piece of paper. The Antarctic Treaty, originally signed in 1959, designated the continent as a place of peace and science. But the true lock on the vault came later with the Madrid Protocol of 1991, which explicitly banned all mining and mineral extraction. However, treaties are not eternal laws of physics. They are agreements between nations, and nations change. The Madrid Protocol has a clause that haunts the future of the continent. In the year 2048, the ban on mining can be brought up for review. This date looms like a long shadow over the ice. It is the expiration date on the silence. If by 2048 the world is energy-starved, if the easy oil is gone, and if the ice has retreated enough to make drilling feasible, the pressure to break the lock will be immense. The war for the future of Antarctica has not started with gunfire, but with architecture. Across the continent, nations are building. They call these structures research stations, but in the language of geopolitics, they are flags frozen into the ice. The location of a base is never random. It is a strategic claim. We are witnessing a silent Cold War, a game of chess played with logistics, concrete, and steel. Great powers are upgrading their runways to handle heavy military transport planes. They are building new fleets of nuclear-powered icebreakers. They are installing satellite ground stations that serve a dual purpose, tracking climate data for science and guiding missiles for the military. The ice is no longer just a barrier. It is a board, and the pieces are moving. As the geopolitical chess game plays out on the surface, the biology of the continent is undergoing a transformation of its own. The melting ice releases more than just water and gas. Ice is nature's most perfect preservative. It is a cryogenic freezer that locks away everything that falls into it, suspending the laws of decay.
Deep within the Antarctic permafrost and the ancient glacial ice are biological entities that have been dormant for millennia, sometimes millions of years. They are not dead, they are merely waiting. They exist in a state of suspended animation known as cryptobiosis. The fear of these zombie pathogens is not science fiction, it is a documented reality. In Siberia, scientists have already revived giant viruses from 30,000-year-old permafrost, viruses that immediately woke up and began to kill. In Antarctica, the ice is far older. It holds biomes from eras before humans even existed. The concern is biological dark matter, viruses and bacteria that modern science has never seen. Pathogens that evolved to infect the hosts of the Eocene or the Pleistocene. As the meltwater runs into the ocean and evaporates into the atmosphere, it could carry these microscopic time travelers with it. The terrifying reality is that the human immune system operates on memory. We are immune to diseases we have co-evolved with, but we have no evolutionary memory of these ancient pathogens. We are, biologically speaking, naive. The melting of the cryosphere is a potential Pandora's box, opening a door to a microbial past that was meant to stay buried forever. Faced with the terrifying speed of the melt, humanity is beginning to consider the unthinkable. If we cannot stop the warming of the air through politics, perhaps we can engineer the planet itself. This is the realm of geoengineering, massive, deliberate, and desperate interventions. Scientists are proposing monumental projects, such as building massive underwater curtains or seawalls around key glaciers like Thwaites to block the warm, deep ocean currents. Others look to the sky, proposing to spray vast clouds of reflective sulfate aerosols into the stratosphere to dim the sun. These are ideas born of profound desperation. We have reached the point where we are contemplating hacking the planet's operating system to save ourselves from the drowning water of the South.
Ultimately, the story of Antarctica is not a story of conquest. It is a story of cycles. The continent was once green, then it was white, and perhaps millions of years from now, long after our names are forgotten, it will be green again. The geopolitical posturing, the titanium flags planted on the seabed, the feverish hunger for oil, the anxious calculations of melting rates, all of this is a fleeting noise on the surface of a much deeper, slower reality. Human ambition is fast, the ice is slow. But in the long run, the ice always wins. There will come a time when the machines stop, whether because we leave, or because the treaties hold, or because the environment simply becomes too hostile to sustain our presence. The noise of the Anthropocene will eventually fade. When the generators at the South Pole are turned off, the silence will rush back in within seconds. The wind, which never sleeps, will begin its work immediately. It will bury the research stations in drifts of hard white snow. The moving glaciers will shear the runways and crush the buildings, grinding our steel and concrete into dust and depositing it into the Southern Ocean. The ice will reclaim the footprint. The continent will return to its natural state. It will return to the silence. It is a silence that has lasted for 34 million years, a heavy, cold, and beautiful peace that existed long before we arrived to measure it and will endure long after we are gone. So, as you lie here in the warmth and safety of your bed, let your mind travel south. Let it drift past the cities, past the forests, over the dark, churning waters of the Southern Ocean, all the way to the bottom of the world. Imagine yourself standing on the high polar plateau under the endless star-filled night. There is no sound there but the wind polishing the ice. There is no movement but the slow, imperceptible drift of the glaciers sliding toward the sea. It is a place of absolute stillness, a pause in the frantic rhythm of the planet. The secrets of the subglacial lakes, the fire of the hidden volcanoes, and the ghosts of the buried mountains are safe beneath the cold blanket.
The Earth is holding its memories tight, locking them away in the frozen dark where they cannot be disturbed. You can let go of the questions now. You can release the need to know, the need to explore, the need to worry about the future. The giant is sleeping, and the world is turning, slow and steady in the quiet dark. The ice will keep its watch. You are safe. Good night.